Newsweek calls Wilmington Murder Town, USA. The police chief reacts to that and talks about how he plans to make things better. This is The Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. Welcome to The Delaware Way. I'd like to welcome back to the show Wilmington Chief of Police, Bobby Cummings. Thank you. I'm sure you are so happy to see a new year.
Absolutely coming, yes.
Because you took office last year.
I did.
And it was in the middle of a murder spree, you might want to call it, for the city of Wilmington. Per capita, the year before, you had the highest murder rate in the country. Then you take office, and it seemed like for a while it was going to, the murders just stopped for a while. Then they picked up, and another record-setting year for you. What happened?
Well, during that time we had the spike. There were a couple individuals in the city that we were able to identify that was involved in a lot of criminal activity that was going on. So when you saw that downtick in our homicides and shootings, it was because we were able to arrest those individuals and take them off the street. Shortly thereafter, we went to another spike. There was another group that came up because when we removed the one individual or two individuals, somebody else started to fill their void. A lot of these incidents were around, groups combating, and there was one guy who was pointed out to be a hitman. So he was going after targeted individuals, and we subsequently identified that person and was able to get them off the street also.
That's important to point out, what you just said. There's two things important to point out. One thing is that when we talk about the murder rate in Wilmington, it's per capita.
Yes.
Certainly Chicago, Detroit, there are other cities that have many more murders than Wilmington. And so we're talking about murders in the 20s for a year. So that's why when you have one person out there,
yes,
they can spike that murder rate very high. So in going through it, on August 31st, you had 2 murders. And then there was a stretch of almost 2 months where you had none.
Yes.
That was one person on August 31st that you got off the street?
Absolutely, yes.
Who had caused several of these murders?
Yes, and involved in a number of the shooting incidents that were taking place where no one was hit.
How do you stop these murders before they happen?
Well, part of that is getting out in the neighborhood and building these relationships. We have to involve the community, again, not just a police issue. We get into the schools, we go out and we do preventive measures to try and impact what's happening with these homicides. The more we can identify these groups as they're coming up and being built, that's how we get on top of getting to some of these homicides. And the other piece is, getting to the individuals that are providing weapons on the street that these homicides are being committed with. So it's really a lot of preventive upfront, relationship building, getting known in the community, and finding out through our intelligence piece who are the ones that are involved in these type of activities and who is likely to be involved in this.
Tell me how much the drug trade has to do with this.
Well, again, there are individuals out there who have become a part of that environment where that's their only economic means. So in order for that to continue, if someone is impeding on their area or territory, they need to make sure they take the competition out, remove them in some kind of means, get them to move on to somewhere else, or it's going to get confrontational to where maybe someone might lose their life.
So for your goals,
yes,
of bringing down these murders, does that mean then you have to lean on the drug trade in the city more than you have been in the past?
We do, and we have resources that we've brought in to help us do that.
And what are those resources?
Resources are from the Department of Justice. We're part of a group called the VRN, where they've identified 5 cities throughout the United States. And we're getting resources from, like I said, the Department of Justice, which includes the FBI, the DEA, ATF, the U.S. Marshal's Office, to deal with these individuals that we're identifying as being a part of that environment that causes those issues. So we have resources that are tied into just identifying just that and then going and take them off the street.
And when did that start?
We started that just after mid-October.
But didn't the murder spike happen right after that?
Yes, there was another individual that was out there who got involved in some activities, and we also identified him very quickly and got him off the street.
Is it unfair to tie the two together? That this initiative took over that was supposed to reduce murders, and then right afterwards there was a spike in the murders. Was it too soon to blame one for the other, or to say one didn't work because of the other?
Well, I think because we were able to take another individual off the street, it kind of played into that where it allowed another individual to step up a little bit. While we had these resources coming, it helped us get to a quicker resolution of identifying an individual. So it kind of came in around the same time period.
So let's talk about the homicide unit.
Okay.
First off. The homicide unit, how successful has it been so far?
Right now, it's becoming successful. We did have the opportunity to solve a homicide shortly after the unit was put into place. They solved that homicide within 48 hours. Now, to think that that's going to be the solve all for all of our issues that are occurring in the city would not be fair. But I can tell you that that homicide unit is looking at all of the incidents that have occurred in the city where we have information that we have that can solve some cases, and we have information where we put some cases together that we're going back to the Attorney General's office to ask them to take another look at.
And how many people are in this homicide unit?
We have a supervisor from the Wilmington Department of Police. We have 5 investigators. We have 2 agents from the ATF, and we have a cold case unit that is a part of that.
And how many are in the cold case unit?
2.
So you have less than 10?
Yes.
When you sat here the last time I spoke with you,
yes,
you asked for many, many more than that.
Yes.
Do you have enough?
Well, like I said before, I will say we never have enough. But when you have to look at your resources and the community is asking for you to make some changes and do something different, what we did was we looked inside and we realigned some of our other divisions to make this work.
So you have the new homicide unit that you asked for, and I know that doesn't stop murders. That just makes it so that if you commit a murder, you're going to get caught, and so you can't get away with murder.
Right.
You have now, so you got that you asked for. You now have some help from the federal government.
Yes.
That is coming in as well. And so because of that, and because there's so much attention on this, is there a promise you can make? Is there, what is the result on that next year? What is your goal? Obviously, is to bring down the murder rate.
Absolutely.
But so that has to happen next year.
Well,
I mean, how much pressure is on you at this point? Is what I'm saying. Can you guarantee that's going to happen?
I can't guarantee. The only thing I can guarantee you is that we will make an effort into solving crimes that happen in our city. We will do, for all the resources that we have, we will make a concerted effort to bring down and try to reduce. But to give you an actual guarantee on a date or the numbers, I couldn't do that.
What I'm looking at is how you feel about it. So
Yes.
you go into next year and you have
Yes.
this murder rate, and you were brought in to bring it down. If it's not down next year, will you consider that a failure?
I would not consider it a failure because in life, things will occur. We will take the best resources that we have to make an effort. But if it's viewed by the community that it's a failure, that's who's going to tell me when it's a failure. But because the numbers may go up and we may be making impact in other areas of the city that have improved, but violent crime is #1 objective, to bring that down. And if we don't do that, in some aspects, if that happens, yes, I would say that would be a failure.
You know, as you're answering, I thought to myself how unfair the question is, because if you were to have, who knows what's going to happen? If you had a mass shooting at a factory, all of a sudden your numbers go up, and there's no way you could foresee that happening. So I understand that the question was a little bit unfair, but I wanted to find out what you were thinking about. We're having this conversation right now with the backdrop of a national debate over policing.
Yes.
And I'd like to talk to you more about that when we come right back on the Delaware Way with Wilmington Chief of Police, Bobby Cummings. I'm Larry Menti. Welcome back to the Delaware Way. We're with Wilmington Chief of Police Bobby Cummings, and we've been talking about mostly the murder rate in Wilmington, which is on top of everyone's mind. Newsweek magazine put out an article called on Wilmington and called it Murder Town USA. What was your reaction to that?
That does a disservice to our city, calling us that.
Why?
Well, as we stated earlier, there are a number of cities around the country that has a higher rate of homicides than what we do. Again, any homicide is bad. So we're not saying that we don't have homicides. And like you said, our numbers are based on per capita. But to paint the city of Wilmington as a murder town is unfair to our residents, unfair to our business owners, is unfair to anyone who would like to visit our city. again, like I tell a lot of people I speak with all the time, I've been around the country and I've visited a lot of cities. And I'm always glad when I come back to Wilmington because of what we have here.
When you came into office, there was a horrible murder spree. Has that murder rate, I don't know if you break it up into months or weeks, has it gone down since you've taken over?
The homicides are, in comparison to last year, are up by about 42%. The number of shooting incidents are down by 6%, and the shooting victims are down by about 7%.
Just in general, do you think it's fair, the protesters, the way they're attacking police officers for those two actions? Do you feel at all as you're being cast, you personally or your department is being cast in a negative light?
I don't think our department is cast in a negative light. I think what's happening is that people are asking for things to be fair and just. And for a department to think that there's things that we never do anything wrong, I think would be also a disservice. So it's good to be challenged sometimes about how you're conducting your business and making sure that you are fair and just.
So you think the protests are righteous, that they do have a point?
I think they have a right to express their First Amendment and their feelings. There are laws that we are governed by when we carry out our business, and I think sometimes we just have to educate the people around those laws in which we are governed by. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong, and it doesn't mean that we're always right, but we do need to take a look at these things at times.
Is that an acknowledgement by you that there is a problem with policing across the country, with policing in African-American neighborhoods?
I say there are some things that need to be looked at in the neighborhoods and how policing is conducted, yes.
Specifically what?
Again, how we carry out our business, some of your policies and procedures, some of the laws that we're governed by, again, need to be revisited at times.
In Ferguson, did Officer Wilson handle himself properly in the way he handled that case?
He followed his procedures and did what he was supposed to do.
Now, as you look at the video with Eric Garner in Staten Island,
yes,
did they handle that properly?
I think it could have been handled another way.
What specifically did they do wrong?
Again, if it's by their policy, there might be a violation there. But in terms of state law, the officer may be okay with that and following state law.
So he would be, because I think that a lot of people were upset at the time that lesser charges weren't presented to the grand jury. It was just murder. It was just murder or manslaughter that were presented, homicide or manslaughter. Is it fair to say that that Officer Pantaleone, who was the officer in back of Eric Garner, used excess force? That he maybe not excess force is the wrong way to say it. That he accelerated force too quickly, given the situation?
I don't know that he did that. The technique that he used, again, might be seen negatively by his department policies and procedures.
And after promising you I wasn't going to stay on this, I am going to ask you one more question. Was that a chokehold?
Yes.
What you saw was definitely a chokehold?
Yes. Because
he's saying it wasn't. He's saying it was something called a seatbelt maneuver, that he didn't put his forearm to the back of his neck.
Well, I will say, again, not getting, because I wasn't there, but I was a defensive tactics instructor for our police department. And the restraint that he's describing, had he done that, there would not have been a restriction of the his airway. Chokeholds restrict your ability to breathe, and a restraint hold that is designed to put someone out in terms of a sleeper hold restricts blood flow.
Okay. And we'll move on from there to talk about policing. What I specifically want to talk about is some of the recommendations that are being made to departments across the country based on Ferguson and Staten Island and some of the objections by the protesters and others, including the Urban League. We'll be back to talk more about that in just a minute. Back now with Wilmington Chief of Police Bobby Cummings. As we have this conversation, there are still protests going on across the country, specifically about policing in African-American neighborhoods. There are many recommendations that are being put forward. Number one, that the department, the racial makeup of a department should match the racial makeup of a community. Do you agree with that, and is Wilmington there?
I think your police department should be representative of the community that you serve, yes.
Is Wilmington there?
We are not fully there, but we're making strides to get there.
Why is that important?
Well, it's important to have a relationship throughout the community in which you serve. We have different ethnic groups who live in our city. You have different income levels within our city. We have neighborhoods that are called by geographic area. So you need to have officers that represent those areas and can speak to the community in which they serve.
Because the second part of that, when you assume that's true, part of what you're saying is that a white officer in an African-American neighborhood can't police as well because he's not of the same color.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that. What I'm saying is if you have a diverse police department and you have officers from every area, the officers themselves can learn from each other about the different neighborhoods in which they serve. So because you have an officer who lives in, we'll just say an African-American neighborhood, and you have a white officer who services that area, if the officers, like we do, come internally and we teach each other about the different neighborhoods, when you go out to serve that community, you are aware of the issues that are occurring within that area. So then you can better serve the community. Doesn't matter, again, if you're black, white, or Hispanic, Asian, but again, you can build a better rapport in the communities.
Okay, so it's coming up from the neighborhoods, maybe more than the color of someone's skin.
Yes.
Moving on to number 2, one of the other recommendations is this broken window policy, quality of life policy, the idea that you go after some of these lesser crimes and then you necessarily stop some of the bigger crimes from happening. I know one big proponent of this is Newcastle County Chief, the Colonel Elmer Setting.
Yes.
He is big into that policy. Do you agree it works, or does that have to be amended?
I agree that it can work, and there are different environments in which we police, and we do also look at quality of life issues along with other issues within the city, because we're in an urban setting that there are going to be other crime indicators that we need to look at. But that is one of the components that we look at when we do our Wednesday meetings and briefings. We talk about the quality of life issues, because if you deal with quality of life issues, you can impact some of the major crimes that will come out of that down the road.
Do we have to look at a different way of handling those crimes? That they, for instance, it came up because of the Eric Garner case,
yes.
Because he was selling Lucy's on the street, which is not a violent crime and not a major crime, but he had been arrested 31 times before for that same crime. And so what people are doing is looking at that and say, did they have to get that violent for that kind of crime? And I think that's where it comes from. So do you think there has to be a different approach in dealing with lesser crimes?
Again, having background about either a particular individual or location in which you're serving gives you information about how to deal with the particular situation and or individual. Because someone is involved in petty crime, sometimes their actions after that kind of dictate how that confrontation is going to go. So to say that, lesser crimes does not need to go to a force level, sometimes it's dictated by the environment and what's going on. So I can't say that there's a different way we need to handle them. It's just that if you do not deal with those situations, they can go into more violent
Right, I understand.
crimes.
I mean, there's police officers that are shot
Yes.
on traffic stops.
Yes.
So you have to assume every single time that this could turn bad, I would imagine.
We want officers to think of that, but we don't want that to be the forethought. We want them to deal with the situation at hand. And because if we're going into every situation thinking the worst, that every situation is going to turn out bad, then that getting into that confrontation when we stop someone, it's already bad.
And it could accelerate quickly
Exactly.
from that moment. Stop and frisk also of people. There's many people that want to get rid of that completely. There's many departments and many chiefs across the country that defend it if it's done properly. Where
Absolutely.
do you stand?
If it's done properly within the constitutional laws, then I think it's fine.
So stop and frisk is okay. Last one, and it's the last big recommendation, that many people want to take these high-profile cases when they involve, especially involve police shootings, away from district attorneys, because they said the district attorneys necessarily are close with the police department and depend on them to build cases, and they may not go after those cases as vigorously as other cases, and they want to bring in a special prosecutor. Good idea or bad idea?
I've really not given that one a lot of thought yet. However, like I said, we deal with our prosecutors on a daily basis. They are aware of the laws that surround how we operate, as well as some of the defense attorneys who are aware of how we operate on a daily basis. And we just have to make sure that the system stays fair, impartial, and that they listen to the evidence that's being presented.
You don't believe that a district attorney that you deal with a lot and your department deals with a lot would have a conflict in then taking your case to a grand jury?
And again, there's just so much that goes into this.
No, I understand. It's a difficult question.
Yes.
I know many of the police unions and police chief associations and the police are against this idea, but the cynical part of a lot of people are saying because they've done so well under this system so far, and there haven't been a lot of charges brought. So I'm not going to put you on the spot anymore about it, because I understand that you're getting this for the first time. But I think a lot of people would like to see that of all the recommendations, that's an easy one to remove a conflict of interest. I want to wrap it up with you when we come back, just to talk about the coming year and what the citizens of Wilmington and all of us in the area can expect from you in this coming year, when we come right back with the Wilmington Chief of Police. We are now wrapping up our conversation with Wilmington Chief of Police, Bobby Cummings. Thank you so much for being here. Let me just say personally that I know a lot of people who would have canceled this interview because of the Newsweek article and because of the numbers, and I admire you so much for not doing that and for coming in here, because I think it's important that you talk to the public all the time. This show represents your citizens and you're talking to them, so I admire that a lot. What can we expect from you in this coming year? How will things be different?
Well, what you can expect from the police department is that we are more open to partnering with the residents. We're open to partnering with our organizations that are in a non-traditional sense to improving what's happening in our city. We have a police academy class that will be coming out shortly, and we're going to be back at authorized strength. So the presence that we can provide on the street is going to be much greater, and the service in which we, again, provide, you're going to see a deeper commitment from the officers to make sure that we build trust within our community.
And I know you've been working closely with the federal government, with the state, and with the county. We had Elmer Setting in here a little while ago, and he said that you didn't have the computer resources that you need, and he's trying to help out with that. With everything coming together to focus on Wilmington and help with Wilmington, do you think people on the streets are going to notice this immediately?
They're not going to notice it immediately, but they will see an impact coming. Again, all I can say is there are going to be a lot of tremendous things that will be coming out of this partnership with the Department of Justice and our neighborhood associations, that people will see it within. So
they'll see officers more. They're going to see some of the brass more out in their neighborhoods, and you're going to have community meetings. One last question, and this is about you, because you're at the center of this whole thing. How are you holding up under it all?
I'm doing fine. A lot of people ask me that a lot. Are you under stress, or how do you feel? And what I say is that it's not personal. This is a business that we have to do. This is what I do, and I'm good at it. But at the end of the day, I don't take it home and stress over it. So how I get through it is, again, to treat it as a business and build relationships and invite anyone in who's willing to help us.
Do you think about how much you will be heralded if you're able to fix this problem? I mean, you're going to be, you very well could be, it's getting national attention, you could be a national star if you fix this.
Those things are never on the front of my mind. The thing is, I just want to help people. I want to help this city. I want to move us forward. So I never look at it in those terms.
Oh, we do, though, and we'll do it for you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in today, more than you know. Wilmington Chief of Police, Bobby Cummings, who has a difficult job, and we're all pulling for him in the new year. I hope you had a happy new year. We'll see you again next week.